Government Business Orders of the Day number 1, standing in the name of Mr Maley, the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill 2025, Serial 35. To move the bill be now read a second time.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I seek leave for the debate on the second reading of the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill Serial 35 and Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill 2025 Serial 6 be taken incognately together.
Is leave granted?
Aye.
There being no objection, leave is granted.
Madam Speaker, I move that Electricity and Market Operator Bill 2025 Serial 35 and the Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill 2025 Serial 36 now be read a second time.
The Assembly is now debating both the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill 2025 Serial 35 and the Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill 2025 Serial 36 together. I call on the next member to speak in the cognate second reading debate. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and we support the cognate bills because it makes absolute sense. So thank you very much, Deputy Chief Minister, for clearing that up, because we assume that both legislation would have a very similar aspect. So thank you for that. Madam Speaker, the primary object for the electricity sector has always been very clear. It's something that our Labor opposition support, and it is to promote the effective and efficient investment in operation and the use of our electricity services across the Northern Territory, not just now, Madam Speaker, but into the long term, for the interests of the consumers of electricity, Territorians that we represent in this House. Madam Speaker, that means acting in the best interest of Territorians when it comes to price, quality, safety, reliability of supply, the security and stability of our local electricity systems, and ensuring that the Territory makes a meaningful and lasting transition to renewable energy. Madam Speaker, these are not abstract principles. They are the foundation of good energy policy, and they are the standards against which any government should be judged. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, we've seen from this CLP government they have walked away from each and every single one of these very important principles. And so far, their record in this area is patchy at best. And in reality, Madam Speaker, it is quite woeful, because this will make a big difference for the Territory into the future. The CLP's so-called battery grants were nothing more than a one-off election bribe. They lasted less than a year, Madam Speaker, and they benefited only a handful of Territorians. They did nothing meaningful to expand solar use across the Territory, and I don't think they will over the next 3 years, and it will be a base-level sugar hit timed to win votes when they do act again. The CLP government has also doubled solar tariffs for periods when the sun doesn't shine, Madam Speaker. Perhaps the CLP thinks that the sun sets at 9 o'clock here in the Northern Territory. Maybe they should move down south and tell when they keep telling people to get out if they don't like it the way that they're governing. This change is nonsensical, Madam Speaker. It is unfair, and it is deeply offensive to Territorians who were promised by the CLP when they were in opposition through the election that they would be doubling the solar feed-in tariffs for the peak times, which everyone knows, Madam Speaker. We've spoken about this in the House many, many times before, the peak times of 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. here in the Northern Territory. Instead, Madam Speaker, they backpedaled, they backflipped, and they broke their election commitment and promise to Territorians. Some Territorians spoke out. The very single issue that they may have voted for the CLP on was around doubling the solar feed-in tariffs. Instead, their broken election commitment resulted in the feed-in times going from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m, Madam Speaker, a 3-hour window, and absolutely not in the peak times that everyone expected. Madam Speaker, then there are changes to power prices that have punished everyday Territory families. Central Australians who need heaters to get through freezing winter nights are now being slugged unfairly. Families in our rural areas who rely on bore pumps for their water have also been hit with these increases. The CLP promised to restore the Territory lifestyle, but in reality they have punished the very Territorians who live in our rural areas and who endure our coldest winters in the Territory on their hip pocket. And I agree, Madam Speaker, that the government reforms to the electricity market are necessary. We definitely need a clear framework when it comes to planning, procurement and system control. These reforms are meant to facilitate an orderly and efficient transition to renewable energy, Madam Speaker. That is what the intent of these two pieces of legislation before us should be: a system that gives investors certainty, consumer fairness and our territory a pathway to a cleaner, more sustainable future when it comes to the energy mix. But here is the problem. This work is being led by the CLP government that has shown no belief in renewable energy, no commitment to energy emissions reduction, and no vision on climate action, Madam Speaker. This is the same CLP government that proudly scrapped the renewable energy target without a single plan of replacement. The same CLP government who claimed to believe in climate change, then act otherwise, and have also, Madam Speaker, misled Territorians about the government's intention on emission reductions. So, more than a little surprisingly, to see the government push through the reforms that, on paper, are designed to support the very transition that they have spent years and years undermining when they're in opposition. It is the height of hypocrisy, Madam Speaker. They're happy to say the words market reform, but they cannot bring themselves to say the words, and I'll say it again, a dirty word for the CLP, renewable energy target, Madam Speaker. It is truly, truly bizarre that the minister responsible in this legislation today, the member Nelson, in his introductory speech, refused to say the word renewables or solar. The whole introduction of this legislation, Madam Speaker, those two words were completely omitted from the introduction of this legislation. And it reminds me of a time, Madam Speaker, and you have been around longer than I have, when the CLP government, when they were last in, banned the word and the use of the words climate change. Like, just phenomenal. It's reminding me of that era and that period, Madam Speaker. So make no mistake that there is exactly what this reform, this legislation is exactly around what needs to happen for the Territory when it comes to bringing more renewables into the energy mix and the market. They are about ensuring that three key electricity systems, the Darwin to Katherine grid, the Tennant Creek grid and the Alice Springs one, have the most cost-effective, reliable energy mix sources, including, Madam Speaker, renewable sources. The legislation is about ensuring that it is planned out well in advance so we do get the best possible deal for Territorians, regardless of which energy source that they use. And, Madam Speaker, that's a great idea. It's a great idea. And I wonder where the CLP got that idea from, Madam Speaker, because let me tell you, they didn't come up with it all by themselves. And the answer, of course, is no, because the work has been done over the last couple of years already in place. So that is why our opposition support, Madam Speaker, the legislation before the House today. The minister can roll out the CLP robot lines that he's been given from his media advisors and his advisors upstairs around action and certainty, or whatever it is that they keep droning on about. But the work was well in train because of the hands of control behind the scenes, thankfully, were not the government. They were the hard workers in the Energy Department and also the three government-owned corporations. In fact, Madam Speaker, we talked about this just yesterday. The CLP is 12 months behind the ball, Madam Speaker. So much for action and certainty. Shame job. Madam Speaker, I seek leave to table the following document. Oh, no, I've done that yesterday. Madam Speaker, yesterday I did table.
Silence, please. Come on.
Oh, don't get so excited. My goodness. I was going to talk about the Territory Electricity Market Overview paper, but Madam Speaker, I spoke about that yesterday because guess what? The CLP government ran out of legislation this week, so they had to fill the 2 hours. Like, it was pretty embarrassing. We heard the doom and gloom, the dire state, not dire straits, the dire state of the electricity market here in the Northern Territory and how it's going to be life-threatening. And then when asked the Deputy Chief Minister yesterday, who actually gave you that advice, and should we all be panicked because everyone's going to be in dire state of their own lives, it's life-threatening? And the answer was, oh, actually, no one told me that advice. I've just said it. I've done a media drop to the NT News to make sure that they report on it so we can prime everyone up about something terrible is going to happen and it's all doom and gloom. But nobody's actually given me that advice. I'm the Deputy Chief Minister. I'm a minister who's responsible to the Crown. I've sworn an oath to the Northern Territory around all the work that I should be doing, but I didn't get any advice about that. I'm just saying it because apparently it's just common sense that we're all going to be in a life-threatening situation because of our electricity market. So a huge slap in the face, Madam Speaker, to all of our energy networks, all of the experts who work in the field, everyone who does that amazing work in our government departments, who does that important technical work in our government-owned corporations, Madam Speaker, Power and Water Corporation, Territory Generation, and of course the retailer, 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈 Energy. All of those experts, not a single one of them has given the Deputy Chief Minister the advice that there are life-threatening blackouts that are at hand. Not a single one of our experts, Madam Speaker. So no basis on that very panicking and doom and gloom statement by the Deputy Chief Minister, Gerard Maley, the member for Nelson. Not a single piece of advice. And when asked also about the regulator, Madam Speaker, the regulator hasn't said anything. The Australian regulator for the energy market, who is responsible for all jurisdictions and the guidelines for every single jurisdiction in the country, making sure that the Territory is not left behind, the Australian Energy Regulator, not a single warning from them either. So where has this come from? It's come from the fifth floor, Madam Speaker, because it sounds good, and then the Deputy Chief Minister's going to run with it with no basis whatsoever, going to frighten Territory. And so if you do experience a blackout in the next couple of months in the wild weather of summer or in the wet season, then nobody will complain to the government because he said that it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen, unfortunately, Madam Speaker, but we do thank, particularly pre-cyclone season coming up now, we do thank the great men and women of Power and Water Corporation, who literally are the ones who put their life on the line, the linesmen and women in those storms, in those cyclones, in those power blackouts to try and restore our lights, our energy when it does go out for different reasons, Madam Speaker. So I put on the record my thanks to those men and women who do that work. So, it's probably a timely reminder, Madam Speaker, to remind Territorians, whilst it can be frustrating when power surges happen and blackouts do occur, that there are literally men and women behind the scenes who work day in, day out, nighttime and daytime, to restore the supply of energy and electricity to us at our houses, at our businesses, in our workplaces. So, Madam Speaker, please, just an opportune time to speak about the patience, but also the thanks and appreciation we should provide those men and women for the work that they do. Madam Speaker, when we talk about energy efficiency, and the work that was done over the last couple of years, and the document that I tabled yesterday to the Parliament, it was dated February 2024. That was months before the election. So if you do want a good summary about what these bills are about, I highly recommend, if you haven't already, I hope everyone has done their work on the government side, but reading that document, it'll be on the parliamentary record, of course, it was tabled yesterday. Reading that document provides a really good understanding and setting for why this legislation is being brought before the House today. So that would be the best source of truth and information for people who are not necessarily across it. I know it is such a technical space to acknowledge. It took me a lot of learning around that space when I did hold the portfolio previously, but such an important part of getting right when it comes to not just the energy supply of today here in the Territory, but of course into the short, medium and long-term future of the Northern Territory. And Madam Speaker, one of the areas is the public procurement model, and I know the Minister spooked it in his introductory speak, but there was a lot that came in before that, Madam Speaker, and it was considered the best and most pragmatic option for improving renewable energy integration when it comes to ensuring a secure, reliable and affordable energy future for the Territory. But it is all there in the document, Madam Speaker. I am absolutely gobsmacked, though, that absolute immaturity and hypocrisy of Minister Maley in refusing to utter the word renewables in the context of this very important legislation, the cognate legislation, the two pieces, Madam Speaker. And it does beg the question, who is the Deputy Chief Minister trying to appease by refusing to acknowledge transition of renewables, Madam Speaker? Is he fearing being called a greenie if he talks about the word renewables? I don't know. Hopefully he addresses that in his wrap speech, Madam Speaker, because renewables is not a dirty word. It should not be looked at as a negative thing. We know that diesel generation and gas is required to have that really stable energy mix, and Territorians are not silly. They know that, Madam Speaker. So it should be something that should be able to talk about openly, and particularly from the Energy Minister. It's just very, very shameful, Madam Speaker. And how can the CLP claim to be listening to Territorians when they cannot even go out, particularly young Territorians who are very interested in the environment and renewables, and face them and talk to them, look them in the eye and say, this is a government that does support renewables. It would be great to see them. I'd love to be proven wrong in that, Madam Speaker, so if they can talk about renewables, I'm all for it. The Minister stood here, Madam Speaker, in the chamber, and he created a whole lot of fluff about the reasons for this. We're all adults, right? We're all big people in here. You can talk about the things that are going to make a difference for the future of the Territory. That's the government's job. We want to support good things that happen here at the Labor opposition. So it was so bizarre that yesterday the same fear-mongering and lines that got trotted out in the ministerial report by the Deputy Chief Minister, whose performance was that for, Madam Speaker? We don't understand, because the reforms, we have no problem with the reforms. We support the reforms. We started some of the work, and we are honoured to see the CLP government continue that work, because it is, make no mistake about it, Madam Speaker, about the transition to renewables. So why try and deny it? It is beyond belief. It is quite bizarre. Madam Speaker, Territorians will get mixed signals, and there will be uncertainty for the industry and for investors here in the Territory if the government says and does one thing but then doesn't acknowledge what's happening on the other side of the hand. The work and the action of this legislation is a clear example. And Madam Speaker, I would expect that the Minister is able to address that in his reply, that Territorians deserve to know where the CLP government stands and the support of renewables and that very important energy mix. I've already said that there has to be a mix, Madam Speaker. We acknowledge and we understand, we support that. But please, if they could stop misleading Territorians and saying that that is not a part of what this very important legislation is aimed at today, that would be very much appreciated. When the reforms are broken down, Madam Speaker, in this legislation, very clearly some strong points around attracting generation investment to the Territory energy market. I think that's a really great thing. The government needs to support that process, when it comes to industry, and the clear strategic plan around energy needs. The mix and the sources for optimal benefit of all Territorians and for our businesses and for our industries, ensuring that the market response is fit for purpose, that asset infrastructure can meet those needs, but not just now, Madam Speaker, not just the loading that's required now and those peak times that we spoke about, but also into the future, and understanding that balance is something to really wrap your head around. So if you haven't had a briefing from your Minister, CLP backbenchers, please do. It's actually really interesting work that the department and, of course, the three GOCs are leading, and some of the industry, the private investors here in the Territory. And I'll probably go mad if I keep hearing about the solar farms, because there's clearly people in this chamber that do not understand the pressures of connectivity when we talk about those large-scale solar farms. They're a great story for the Territory. They were frustratingly slow.
Silence, please.
So just being able to understand the ignorance and the lack of understanding by the member for Blain, Madam Speaker, it has been more complex and it will continue to be complex, but that's why this legislation is so important. It's to enable more connectivity, to bring in some of those external market providers into that energy mix. The 6 large-scale solar farms around the Northern Territory were frustratingly slow to see some of them come online. to be able, it was the first time, Madam Speaker, it was the first time in the Northern Territory's history to have large-scale solar connectivity brought into the energy mix. So much needed to change in terms of the market settings, the balance of the grid, and making sure that the system wasn't overloaded or underloaded. There's a really fine balance sometimes, being able to understand that requirement. The experts in our Northern Territory government-owned corporations, the experts in our Territory Energy Department, and the experts in private industry who were looking at bringing those new products to market, those large-scale solar. We've got one just outside of Catherine, Madam Speaker. So being able to follow that journey and understand why it wasn't just the solar panels are done, plug them in and off you go, energy source into. There was a huge amount of work around being able to deal with private investors and the government-owned corporations, and then of course residential energy then going into the grid as well, Madam Speaker. So there was a lot of factors, and I can say that I'm sure the minister responsible, the three ministers hopefully, the Essential Services Minister, the Treasurer and the Energy Minister, the three, I hope that they have continued on that learning journey of government and the GOCs, because it is not a simple thing when it comes to energy. But the good thing is, Madam Speaker, this legislation provides more of the settings for some very clear markers of how the future processes of renewables coming in, particularly large-scale solar farms, as a big example that many people would be familiar with, can be connected in. So I think it is a really good way forward. I'm glad that the CLP government has not scrapped this very important work, but it will allow for better and more streamlined process, Madam Speaker, now and into the future, particularly when we're trying to look at investing more and attracting more private investment to the energy sources of the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, investors won't put their money into any jurisdiction without that clear pathway, without clear signals from government that that is supported and that red tape will be removed and that there are clear guidelines that they can work within. We know, Madam Speaker, that families won't invest in their own personal rooftop solar if they think that there's nothing in it for them and they don't understand what the government's plan is to make sure that there are safeguards around energy source and supply. And that's why the mixed signals can be incredibly dangerous with the government's messaging just this week, almost a bit of whiplash, Madam Speaker. So when it comes to climate change and the work that needs to continue to be underpinned by government, it will either be a legacy that can be celebrated or that will be damning on the Northern Territory's energy market. Before the election, Madam Speaker, we look at climate change as an example. The CLP promised Territorians that they had a plan for emissions reduction. They said the right thing to voters before August 2024. But interestingly, Madam Speaker, after the election, those promises disappeared pretty quickly into thin air. Territorians are now paying the price of a government that cannot tell the truth when it comes to energy or climate. The way up for power prices for schools, talked about it already in this House this week, Madam Speaker, but basically by stealth, is another example of the underhanded way that the government has conducted themselves when they don't have real and clear energy policies to guide them, Madam Speaker. And they snuck in those power price hikes for our poor Territory schools without warning and dumping the bill for the Education Department to pick up, Madam Speaker, instead of the resources for schools, instead of the resources for our Territory kids, instead of the resources for our Territory teachers, principals and school staff to make an impact positively for community. They've chucked them with the energy bills instead, without notice, without warning, and people found out after the fact. An absolutely cowardly move by the CLP, Madam Speaker, forcing our Territory schools to find the money from their stretched budgets and hurting teachers and students alike when it comes to being able to resource our schools with the Better Farers Schools agreement that was struck already by the former Labor Territory government and the Albanese Labor government. Madam Speaker, we asked a question this week too. Local government councils will cop the same. The power tariff subsidy is removed and they now find themselves with massively hiked up power bills, Madam Speaker. And it sounds like the truth hurts over there because the CLP has no vision to the Territory's energy future. Anything put forward is the legacy of the former Labor government, but eventually they'll run out of things that we started that they can claim, and they'll actually have to start thinking of their own plans and their own legislation. So let's hope they'll use their Christmas and New Year's period to actually do some good work for the Territory. Madam Speaker, the work that is before the House in this legislation is the culmination of a number of departments, and particularly like to commend the work of Power and Water Corporation because they have made huge efforts into bringing forward these two bills with the work they do. Obviously, they have a footprint in our urban and regional areas, but also in our remote areas, Madam Speaker. And the vision that was given a number of years ago has definitely come to fruition today. So we commend the work of Power and Water Corporation in particular, but the collegial work across the GOX and the Energy Department. Huge congratulations to everyone behind the scenes. This very complex work, which is not just plucked out of nowhere, hasn't just magically started 14 months ago because the CLP came to government. We are very proud of the work that the Territory has led when it comes to their legislation that they continue to work on diligently, even though it should have come in this time last year, Madam Speaker, into the House. It is incredibly fortunate, Madam Speaker, that the bulk of the work was done, which meant that the CLP couldn't back out. Hopefully the 14 months to catch up on everything has meant that they realised this is actually good for the Territory, otherwise it would have been completely directionless when it comes to the energy future and the market here in the Northern Territory. But again, Madam Speaker, as I said yesterday and today, the CLP is absolutely 1 year behind these reforms. So this, Madam Speaker, is indicative of a government who has no long-term plan, no pathways for renewables beyond what our diligent public servants have been forging on with in the background. Obviously, the government hasn't paid much attention to them. So thankfully, the work that they've done has been recognised, and we will see the legislation before the House and hopefully come into effect so that more good work from our public servants can continue. Madam Speaker, we've seen nothing but short-term stunts and no actual strategy and planning from the CLP government when it comes to energy. And we need to show businesses certainty. One of their catchwords, one of the CLP Buzz catchwords of the year, businesses need to have certainty. And, Madam Speaker, families need to have confidence that the government is doing what they should be doing. The Territory's reputation as a place of energy investment will be undermined. It has been already undermined with the toing and froing, the hypocrisy of the CLP government. And that's not what Territorians deserve, Madam Speaker. They deserve to have much more from their government when it comes to long-term planning, not just a headline that looks good, looks bad, whichever way you want to look at it, depending on the government's angle of fear-mongering or celebrating the years of work that has culminated in today. Madam Speaker, renewables are not just good for the environment, but they are critical for lowering the bills of Territorians and attracting that important investment I spoke about earlier, making sure the Territory's economic future is planned properly. Territorians deserve a government that takes the responsibility when it comes to the energy, reliability and stability of the Northern Territory seriously, Madam Speaker, to keep power affordable, reliable and sustainable, to protect consumers. Also, Madam Speaker, really important to protect the hip pocket of Territorians and this high cost of living, to make sure that everyone is prepared and those systems are fit for purpose now and into the future. Madam Speaker, given the highly technical nature of both of these bills and the fact that we as the Labor opposition largely support the substance of what has been produced through this legislation and now in 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈, which we welcome. The work that was commissioned by the former Labor government, we were very supportive of more continued work when it comes to the future of the Territory's energy mix. Madam Speaker, I do have a question of the Minister that I would like if he could answer in his wrap of the bill, and it's in specific detail, and so we're hoping that the question can be answered. The following 4 questions. Could the Minister please explain why it's deliberately avoided using the words renewables and solar when both of these bills are clearly about enabling that in the energy mix? Could the Minister please confirm for industry and for Territorians that these reforms are about ensuring that we have the most cost-effective and most reliable mix of energy sources that are powering our energy networks? And with the mix, will it include solar, thermal and other renewable sources? 2 more questions, Madam Speaker. When will the Minister think that the separation with 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈𝙋𝙎 will be up and running? And is there a time frame for that to happen, considering it's 1 year behind the original time frame that was laid out? And lastly, could the Minister please be extremely transparent in why there was a process of scaremongering yesterday that overshadowed this really good work that was being brought to the House today? And is there even a link between the two? It's really confused people, and I've spoken publicly about this and quietly about this as well, because we do support this bill, but we were concerned about the comments that were brought to the House through the report by the Minister yesterday. I think it's overshadowed the good work that the CLP government continued by bringing those 2 in. I think it's really confused Territorians. So will there be a communication around the cognate bills to Territorians about what this actually means? Because now people are quite confused with the different articles that were dropped to the newspaper yesterday. Madam Speaker, the Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill 2025 and its companion bill are an opportunity to set a new direction for the Territory's electricity market system. And it is to provide Territorians with a fairer system, and it will provide the ability for the government, should they choose, to have a strategy and a clear energy policy for the next couple of years while they are governing, Madam Speaker. We want to make sure that the record around energy is not tainted, it is not severed because of the changes of government, Madam Speaker. We want to ensure that Territorians will not be whacked with a 30% power increase for their bills, like what happened the last time the CLP was in government, because we believe that Territorians deserve much better. In closing, Madam Speaker, the work of the 2 cognate bills are really important when it comes to ensuring there is Territory investment, that we have stability, sustainability in the Northern Territory energy market, and that there is the ability to bring on new sources of energy in the mix, or the supply and the demand, to support not just Territorians and families residentially, but also commercial, our small, medium and large businesses, and what opportunities we have for growing the energy industry and the commercial industry that supplies the energy market here in the Northern Territory. We think this is an exciting story for the Northern Territory. We just hope that it doesn't get, the light on this good story does not get dimmed. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Treasurer, member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I rise in support of the CLP government's electricity market reform legislation. And again, I stand here in this chamber, Madam Speaker, and I listen to the Leader of the Opposition trying to rewrite history. There's a reason that we brought this legislation on, and it was quite clear from reports from the Utilities Commissioner, I believe, who provided advice to the previous Labor government that there was much work to be done on our energy system, including the 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈 and 𝙎𝙎, and the previous government chose not to follow that advice. But, Madam Speaker, we did. We sat down with the Utilities Commissioner and we looked at all that work, and we've moved quickly to introduce this bill. And another thing that, again, I listened to the contribution from the Leader of the Opposition was about renewables. I support renewables. I've got no issues with renewables. But I'm not going to do it at any cost. We're going to do it smart. But the thing is, Labor rushed into renewables and started pushing out solar farms, but they didn't do the work that was needed to be done at the back of the system to make sure that the system was stable. That's why those solar farms, Labor rushed into putting in those solar farms, but it didn't actually do the work to make sure that there was enough battery backup and synchronous condensers to ensure that the stability of the network. Because if they had just bought them online, it would have crashed the system, Madam Speaker. But let me go back to what we're talking about today. And these reforms are not just good energy policy, they're actually very, very good economic policy. And the spin out of the Northern Territory Electrical System and Market Operator and the execution of the Regulated Electricity Supply Investment Plan, more commonly known as 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 and the RECIP, and the introduction of a new public procurement model is just the start of the affordable and reliable energy future the CLP is making possible for the Territory. Madam Speaker, these reforms strike at the heart of how we manage public money, protect Territorians and local businesses from the cost of living pressures and rebuild confidence in the Northern Territory as an energy investment destination. For too long, our electricity system has been treated as a technical problem that Labor failed to fix. And Madam Speaker, under this CLP government, we recognise that a strong energy future for Territorians relies on a well-functioning electricity market. With the Territory's electricity market falling apart after 8 years of Labor and Territorians have to front the costs of this failure, these reforms seek to address that. Madam Speaker, the way the Territory's current electricity market operates couldn't be further from the way that it should be actually operating. When it comes to cost, there's a clear disconnect between the cost of generating electricity and what Territorians and local businesses are paying for it. Madam Speaker, I'm talking about how much the government is quietly footing the bill to keep the Territory's electricity bills artificially low through the government's CSO subsidy. This is a problem which is weighing down our budget. Community service obligations, or CSOs as they're better known, are government subsidies that reduce Territorians' energy bills by around about 50%. And in the current financial year, the Territory budget has to swallow a $51 million increase to our CSO obligations. If it wasn't for our government CSOs, a single household would be paying approximately $1,400 more for their energy bill. For couples, it would be $1,800, and more for a family of four, it would be about $1,900. Madam Speaker, to maintain this level of cost of living support, the CLP for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 government's first budget allocated $192 million to the CSO, so Territorians don't have to dig into their pockets to cover the cost of Labor's failures. And that is real cost of living support for everyday Territorians, Madam Speaker. The savings our government make for Territorians on their energy bills is proportional to the cost of energy bills. In other words, Madam Speaker, the lower the cost to generate energy, the lower the cost passed on to Territorians, and the less our government has to subsidise these costs. Through the reforms being debated today, the CLP is working to narrow the gap between what it costs to generate electricity and what it costs Territorians to use it. With an efficient market system and investment in new, efficient assets that drives down generation costs, these reforms under the CLP set Territorians up for a future where they can more easily afford their energy bill due to downward pressure on costs by our government. That's a win for our electricity system. It's certainly a win for Territorians and effectively a large win for the Territory's bottom line. Madam Speaker, getting control of our electricity costs is not just about ledgers and lines. It's about what Territorians are missing out on when our government has to prop up Labor's neglect of our electricity market. Treasury modelling shows that every $10 million increase in the CSO is equivalent to roughly 40 additional nurses or 60 police officers that we could otherwise employ. As this CLP government works to reduce crime, rebuild our economy and restore our Territory lifestyle, the skyrocketing costs of energy generation and consequently our CSO is another Labor failure that we can't afford not to fix. Without structural change in our electricity market, the CSO will rise faster than inflation and revenue combined. With such unsustainable growth, Madam Speaker, the Territory isn't just missing out on more nurses and police officers. We're missing out on fundings for schools, hospitals and roads. Something has to give. Madam Speaker, this isn't a budget black hole we can just climb out of as our economy recovers. This is a structural deficit that threatens the Territory's future financial viability. These bills reshape the Territory's electricity market and give us the means to ensure this doesn't become the case by putting downward pressure on our electricity bills and our CSO payments and getting that back down to earth. Madam Speaker, it wasn't the CLP that got us to this point. Under the previous Labor government, there was no strategic oversight of electricity investment. Under their government, the Territory's electricity market was left to its own devices and Territorians have had to pay for this disorganisation ever since. Territory Generation, Power and Water Corporation and 𝙿𝙎𝙈𝙀𝙎 have always had Territorians' best interests in mind. But with no overarching plan for our electricity system, each pursued their own projects in isolation, and this duplicates costs and effort. After 8 years of Labor, it's clear they didn't plan for anything, and unfortunately the Territory's electricity market was no different. Instead, Labor pushed ahead with its ideological 50% renewables by 2030 target, ignoring the actual real problems that were plaguing the Territory's electricity market. And the result, Madam Speaker? Solar farms stranded because they couldn't connect safely to the grid. Ageing gas turbines still running at the end of their design life and no sense of urgency to fix them. Blackouts across Darwin, Katherine, Tennant Creek and Alice Springs that cost businesses, productivities and families their comfort. Madam Speaker, this shouldn't be news to those opposite, because the Utilities Commission, as I said, our independent regulator, had been warning them about this for years. Its 2024 Electricity Outlook report identifies immediate reliability risks in the Alice Springs grid and a medium risk in the Darwin-Katherine system. Madam Speaker, this is not good enough for the CLP, and it's certainly not good enough for Territorians. Territorians don't need more political promises, they actually need action, and the CLP is delivering this for them in our year of action, certainty and security. Today our government is acting through moving these reforms forward so that the future Electricity Outlook report may paint a more positive view of our electricity system. And Madam Speaker, to get this work underway, the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill spins out the 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎 and Northern Territory Electricity System Market Operator out of PwC to make it a standalone independent statutory corporation. And Madam Speaker, I cannot stress enough how important this reform is. The CLP are not adding another layer of bureaucracy to our electricity system and bogging it down further in more inefficiency. Instead, Madam Speaker, the 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙀𝙎 will do exactly as its name states, coordinating system planning, procurement and operations across the Territory's regulated networks. It will bring technical expertise and fiscal oversight to our electricity market under one roof, taking it out of isolation in our three current GOCs. The 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙀𝙎 will be responsible for the RECIP, a 10-year master plan for coordinated, least cost electricity investment across our regulated networks. This plan sets out what assets we need and when we need to get them. For the first time, Madam Speaker, the Territory will have a single investment roadmap to replace the random reactive approach that dominated under Labor. By reducing duplication and improving procurement efficiency under the RECIP, this government expects a reduction in generation costs. These cost savings will not happen overnight, of course, but Territorians and our local businesses could have felt these benefits sooner if Labor had got on with the job of fixing our electricity market over the last 8 years rather than neglecting it. Madam Speaker, as Treasurer, I will still have a role to play in approving GOC investments under the RECIP to ensure that Territorians are getting value from their public institutions. However, with the price of emergency gas for electricity generation being one of the main contributors to our fiscal deficit, 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈 and its ownership of the RECIP will ensure that the GOCs take on the right projects at the right costs, bringing fiscal discipline back to our energy system for the benefit of Territorians. With 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈 at the helm of our new and improved electricity market, the RECIP will create a pathway to stabilise both electricity bills and our budget's bottom line. Madam Speaker, the CLP is serious about rebuilding our economy, and the central planning and procurement process introduced under the Electrical Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill provides a clear gateway for new investors to play their part in rebuilding our economy as well. This central procurement model takes the RECIP and puts it into play. Currently, our electricity market is small, with our government-owned corporations playing an outsized role in energy generation, transmission and distribution. Most private involvement in our electricity market is electricity generation in the Darwin-Catherine system, and under Labor, these private operators struggle to get connected to the grid. Going forward, when investors come to the Territory, a centralised procurement model provides a clear entry point for them to get involved and bring their capital here to the Territory, Madam Speaker. The opposition were up in the clouds when it came to what the Territory's electricity market actually needed. However, with the recent blackouts and the challenges we face with such ageing infrastructure, I can tell you that this CLP government is bringing Labor down to earth fast. With this legislation, the CLP are taking the politics out of our electricity system and bringing a level procurement playing field into play. The Territory has everything a private investor could want: abundant gas and abundant sunlight for solar. This new model aligns investor appetite with the Territory's natural capital and shepherds their capital to where our energy system needs it. Madam Speaker, the CLP is the only party which is serious about getting the Territory's energy house in order. We inherited a dysfunctional, costly electricity market in decline and a fiscal position under absolute pressure. But through this bill, we are changing our electricity market for the better. This legislation is about ensuring that the lights stay on and the books stay balanced. Madam Speaker, this is real, once-in-a-generation reform that completely changes the paradigm our electricity market operates in. We're spinning out 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈. We've got a plan for the Territory's electricity market under the RECIP. We're safeguarding the budget so the CSO are the cost of living mechanism they should be, and not a band-aid to stem the bleed of Labor's electricity market failures. We're restoring confidence in the Territory, providing a clear mandate for the role of the government-owned corporations, what they should be doing in playing in our market, and we're positioning the Territory to be the energy investment partner of choice. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, we have investors from all over Australia and from all over the world lining up to invest in the energy market here in the Northern Territory because they can see the benefits, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I commend these bills to the House.
Are there any other speakers? Member for Johnston, are you speaking?
Oh, I am. Yes, now it appears. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to speak to the electricity market reform bills before us. And I want to be clear from the outset, I'm not objecting to the content of these bills. The technical reforms proposed are largely sound, and the creation of a more coordinated planning framework through the Regulated Electricity System and Investment Plan, the RESIP, has real potential to improve how we invest in the Territory's energy future. But that's precisely my point, that this is an opportunity, a significant one, to set the direction for our electricity system for decades to come. We heard yesterday about the extreme pressure and stress that our electricity system is under and the threat that that puts all Territorians to. When we have that kind of opportunity in front of us, we need to make sure that we're using it to its full potential. So the issue is not what's in the bills, the issue is what's been dropped from them, namely, strangely, any clear commitment to renewable energy as part of the Territory's future electricity system. That's not a fatal flaw in the legislation itself, but it is a missed opportunity. And in the context of where the Territory is heading economically, environmentally and in terms of livability, it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. This isn't about opposing reform, it's about making sure that the reform we're undertaking actually sets us up for success. The RESIP framework gives us a chance to plan strategically, to coordinate investment and to think long-term about what our electricity system needs to deliver. So this is an opportunity for us to use it properly. Let's make sure that when we're building this new planning framework, we're building it with clear goals, goals that reflect not just market efficiency, but the Territory's actual needs. Affordable power, reliable supply and a system that can withstand the climate challenges that we are already facing. So the technical structure this bill creates is good, but structure without direction is not enough. We need to know where we're going and we need to make sure that where we're going is somewhere worth getting to. Let me start briefly with the legislation. As we know, these bills allow for the creation of a new electricity planning process, the RESIP. This plan will guide decisions on how electricity generation is procured in the Territory with an oversight from the Northern Territory Electricity System and Market Operator and a new planning and investment review panel. That structure itself is no cause for alarm. It centralises planning and could potentially bring more coordination in how we invest in generation, in storage and in transmission. But there is one critical omission. Nowhere in the stated objectives of the RESIP is a commitment to growing renewable energy generation. That's not a minor oversight. The original reform papers from 2020 and 2024 made it clear that expanding renewables was a clear goal. The updated legislation has removed that principle, quietly but completely. In a jurisdiction like the Northern Territory, with abundant solar resources, high electricity prices and pressing climate risks, the failure to explicitly support renewables is not just short-sighted, it's a deliberate prioritisation of gas industry at the expense of present and future livelihoods across the Northern Territory. The central procurement model being proposed means that future generation projects will need to apply to participate in the market, and without clear policy direction, it's likely that investment decisions will be made on the basis of short-term commercial returns, not long-term environmental or community outcomes. So while these bills themselves don't dismantle existing policy, they do point the system away from a renewables-led transition and towards a model where the market, rather than policy, decides what kind of electricity we want here in the Northern Territory. And in a market still dominated by gas infrastructure, that means we risk locking ourselves into the status quo rather than taking the opportunity to build something better. This is where the opportunity lies. We could use this legislation to send a clear signal that the Territory is serious about renewable energy, that we're planning for it and that we're creating a framework that actively supports it. Madam Speaker, to understand why renewables matter, we need to step back and look at this in a broader context, because obviously energy policy is not in a vacuum. The Northern Territory is already on the front line of climate change, and we are one of the regions least equipped to deal with it. Madam Speaker, let me be absolutely clear. Renewable energy isn't optional for the Northern Territory's future, it's essential. And the longer we treat it as something we'll get to eventually, the harder and more expensive this transition becomes. As I said in our last sitting, anthropogenic or human-caused global heating is happening now. It's not a problem for some future generation. It's impacting on our people here in the Northern Territory. It's impacting on our economy and it's impacting on our environment. Across the Territory, we're already seeing the evidence: rising temperatures, longer and more intense heat waves, prolonged droughts, sea level rise, more destructive cyclones, unpredictable flooding, the spread of tropical disease and shrinking habitats for our plants and animals. These aren't just weather events, Madam Speaker. They are life and death matters. People die in heat waves, particularly when we're talking about extreme heat and humidity here in the Northern Territory. As climate change intensifies, we risk more people dying from heat-related illness. These are preventable deaths if we act urgently to prevent future climate change. And let me emphasise again, we're not talking about distant projections. These are real conditions happening now, and they'll only intensify. When we talk about 1 or 2 degrees of warming, we're talking about the average change across the country. And in climates like ours, in tropical and equatorial climates in the Northern Territory, we experience the extremes of that range. Temperatures in climates like ours are already pushing the limits of human adaptation and livability. Madam Speaker, the reality is that we will not be able to live here. But, Madam Speaker, this is not, the effects of climate change extend beyond housing and heat stress. In April 21, we heard from senior staff specialists at Alice Springs Hospital and ANU researchers publishing research in the Lancet review that 34% of doctors are considering leaving the Territory because of the effects of climate change. We know how much stress our health system is under. Imagine if this happened, the massive gap that it would leave in our healthcare system. Every part of the Northern Territory suffers from health worker shortages, whether it's hospitals, NDIS services, remote clinics or dentists. We cannot afford to lose more health workers. We cannot afford to lose workers in any sector. In fact, what we want to be doing is building our economy, building our workforce and building our population. And if the NT becomes unlivable, it will also become unvisitable. Our tourism season, already confined to the cooler months, will shrink further. Our private tourism sector will suffer, jobs will be lost, businesses will be shut down, and our broader economy will be hit hard. Madam Speaker, I ask my fellow members, do you want to live in a territory like this? Because I certainly don't. And we have an opportunity to prevent that happening by transitioning to renewable energy, by reducing emissions, and by building a resilient, affordable energy system that can meet our needs in a warming world. What's frustrating, Madam Speaker, is that we're not without options. In fact, we're in an extraordinarily strong position if we choose to use it. The Northern Territory is one of the sunniest regions in the country. Tennant Creek is the sunniest place in Oceania with 297 sunny days a year. Alice Springs is 4th with 291 sunny days a year. Darwin is 7th with 250 days. We have enormous potential for solar generation, backed by storage and smart grid technologies. We could, with the right policy settings, not only meet our own needs cleanly and affordably, but potentially export clean power, expertise and innovation to other parts of the country and to other parts of the world. And we also know that we've got an environment that people travel from across the world to see. Tourists come for our wildlife, our wetlands, our rivers and our seas. But climate change is already threatening those ecosystems. And if we don't act now, we will not just be dealing with lost biodiversity, but with lost jobs, lost revenue, and we will have lost our home to live. We know that the Territory's economy is small and exposed. We can't afford to bet on a gas-led recovery while ignoring the global shift toward renewable energy. Other jurisdictions are investing in renewables not out of ideology, but out of basic economic self-interest. We should be doing the same. Renewables are already the cheapest form of energy on the market, and they're only going to get cheaper. We do not want to end up as the only buyer left for gas, paying through the nose because demand has plummeted and gas companies are stuck trying to offload gas to a handful of buyers. The world is moving away from gas for climate reasons and for economic reasons, and it's time for us to do the same. Any energy plan that does not include renewables is a plan that locks Territorians into higher energy prices and catastrophic climate consequences. The answer is not evading us, Mr Deputy Speaker. The answer is renewables. Everyone outside this chamber knows that, and it's time for the government to catch up. So my message to the government is this. If these bills are about setting the foundations for a modern electricity market, then let's make sure that the foundations support the kind of future we actually need. That means including minimum renewable energy targets in the RESIP. We need clear, measurable commitments to growing renewable energy generation as part of the Territory's energy mix. requiring genuine community consultation, not just industry consultation, on the RESIP before it's finalised. The people who will live with these decisions deserve a say in them. And ensuring that the Planning and Investment Review Panel includes representation from community, from consumer and from environmental stakeholders, not just government and market players. Mr Deputy Speaker, these aren't radical demands, they're sensible improvements that would turn good technical legislation into genuinely transformative policy. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I said, these bills aren't bad, but they could be so much better. They give us a structure for planning, but now, as I said, we need the vision for what we're planning towards. The question before us isn't about market efficiency or regulatory frameworks, it's about what kind of territory we want to build and whether we're willing to make the choices now that will give our children and grandchildren a livable future. We have the sun, we have the land, we have the technology, and we have the economic imperative, and we have the moral responsibility. What we need now is the political will to put renewable energy at the centre of this reform, not as an afterthought, not as something that we'll get to eventually, but as a core, explicit, non-negotiable part of our energy future. This is an opportunity for us here in this chamber. Let's not waste it. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Johnston. Any other speakers? Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I rise in support of the electricity market reform legislation introduced by the Deputy Chief Minister. As the Minister for Essential Services, one of my core responsibilities is to ensure that Territorians are provided with a secure and reliable power supply. As repeatedly emphasised over the last few days, this has been a challenging task, I should say, due to the dire state the former Labor government left our electricity grid in after 8 years of neglect. The Utilities Commission has long advised the necessity and urgency of the reforms being debated today. Reforms, despite their critical urgency, the former government never got around to introducing. Those opposite claim to have started work on these reforms, but the fact of the matter is simple. These reforms were not delivered by the former Labor government. Mr Deputy Speaker, I should say, while Labor failed to deliver these critical reforms over their 2 terms in government, our CLP government understands how fundamental, secure, reliable and affordable power is to almost every part of the Territory's economy and lifestyle. So when Territorians put their trust in the CLP 14 months ago, my colleague, the Deputy Chief Minister, got cracking on work to ensure our government delivered on its commitment to provide Territorians with secure, reliable and affordable power. The results of this hard work are on full display this afternoon, with passage of these bills representing the first step in safeguarding the Territory's electricity system. These 2 bills are critical to providing the electricity market reform the community, industry and the independent regulator have long requested. With the support of the Chamber, this government will pass these bills and take the first of many steps to reassure Territorians that they will not have to put up with interruptions and outages brought on by Labor's 8 years of inaction, mismanagement and neglect. 3 areas of reform introduced in the bills being debated today that I'm most excited about are the critical improvements to system planning through the definition of the Northern Territory's electricity system and market operators, known as 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈𝙀𝙁 responsibility to deliver a regulated electricity system investment plan, known as the RESIP, and conduct wider whole-of-system planning. The move to a centralised public procurement model and the formalised definition of Territory Generation's role in maintaining ancillary services critical to stabilising the grid, while also establishing a framework for the equitable cost sharing of these services across market participants. Mr Deputy Speaker, the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill 2025 separates system control function from Power and Water Corporation and establishes 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙈 as an independent statutory corporation responsible for, amongst other things, whole-of-system planning. Whole-of-system planning is of particular interest to me in my role as the Minister for Essential Services, as it is a critical factor to ensuring the future system reliability that Territorians deserve.
I'm sure those in the chamber understand delivering true reliability requires years of strong government oversight, decisive action and a sustained pipeline of investment that replaces ageing assets, strengthens transmission and storage and builds new generation and firming capacity. So while it would have been better for the Territory's electricity system's reliability if the previous government had passed whole-of-system planning legislation years ago, as was recommended to them, they did not. Hence why it is critical that this government takes action where Labor failed and pass the bills put forward by the Deputy Chief Minister today. Mr Deputy Speaker, our government has decided, based on expert advice, that the best framework for this whole-of-system planning to take place is through a regulated electricity system and investment plan, the RESIP, developed and centrally procured by 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙀𝙈𝙀𝙎 at the direction of and mandated by the Minister for Energy. The RESIP will determine the portfolio of required investments in capacity and essential system services in Darwin, Katherine, Alice Springs and Tennant Creek, regulated electricity systems to ensure system security, reliability and supply at least cost. This plan will be developed periodically for each of the regulated electricity systems and will specifically determine the optimised timing, location and scale of electricity assets required in a 10-year forward plan. The legislated assurance that whole-of-system planning will be conducted by 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙀𝙈 through the introduction of the RESIP will ensure that in the future our grid will be more reliable. To provide context on why the bills presented today are necessary, particularly why the establishment of legislated whole-of-system planning is critical, I would like to take the chance to refer to a case study that so clearly demonstrates what can go wrong when the critical planning does not occur. And I refer to the 8 years the Territory spent under the previous Labor government. While whole-of-system planning for the electricity system may seem like an obvious function of government, the Territory has, over the last 8 years, observed the failures of a Labor government that neglected to conduct whole-of-system planning, or if they did, failed to get meaningful results or tangible benefits for Territorians. Yesterday, I informed the Chamber about the failure of Labor to finalise a plan to replace Channel Islands' ageing generators as they approach end of life. To summarise my previous contribution, due to a lack of forward planning by the Labor government, Channel Islands' original gas generators are still operating after nearly 40 years, elevating the risk of mechanical failure and system trips, increasing the likelihood of blackouts. The truth is, due to Labor's planning failure, it isn't just Darwin's grid currently facing stability issues, but just don't take my word for it. Power and Water publish a list of current system constraints, all of which can be directly linked to Labor's planning failures. By way of background, system constraints are notifications designed to give market participants warning that system control may need to act in order to secure and stabilise the power system. There are several current long-standing system constraints dating back to Labor's time in office, which affect system participants in the Darwin-Katherine, Tennant Creek and Alice Springs generation, transmission and distribution networks. And Mr Deputy Speaker, it appears Labor were not conducting much in the way of system planning to provide future respite from these constraints. Mr Deputy Speaker, Alice Springs Power Station has been operating under constraint restrictions since 2019, before Labor even commenced their second term in government. Due to this constraint, there are times when Power and Water system control need to curtail rooftop and utility solar in Alice Springs to maintain grid stability and reliability. This is not a good outcome for large-scale solar generators who have invested in Alice Springs, or in fact anyone in Alice Springs with solar installed on their roof, who can have their solar exports turned off at any time. Labor had 5 years to plan and implement solutions to alleviate grid concerns in Alice, yet this constraint still remains today. In Tennant Creek, due to grid instability, there has also been operating under a generation restriction since 2019. As the Deputy Chief Minister reminded the Assembly yesterday, in the 18 months the Opposition Leader was Minister for Essential Services, Tennant Creek was classed as the most stable of the Territory's grids. Considering the size of Tennant Creek grid and the aforementioned relative stability, you would think that Labor would have at least tried to address the issues faced. Yet, from the records and information available to me, I've found little or to no evidence that the Labor government or now Opposition Leader took any action to resolve Tennant Creek's stability issues. The Darwin-Katherine grid. Amongst other challenges, the Darwin-Katherine grid is currently facing due to Labor's neglect. System Control has placed major system constraints on the Darwin-Katherine electricity system, with many in place since 2020 and 2021 up until today. These include generation restrictions put in place to account for increasing rooftop solar penetration to ensure that the system retains adequate minimum spinning reserve for grid stability, and that once system demand falls below 100 megawatts, capping solar exports at 0 megawatts takes place to ensure baseload gas units can continue to operate effectively in periods of low system load. Labor's failures to address system constraints across the 3 regulated electricity networks is inexcusable and further exemplifies the former government's lack of a credible plan for the Territory's electricity systems. But I have to say, while it may be inexcusable, a lack of action is not out of character for the former Labor government. While Labor failed to plan or act, the approximately 80% of Territorians living in a regulated grid can rest assured that today the CLP government is taking direct action to clean up Labor's mess. The recipe legislated in the electricity market reform bills being debated today is our government's concrete response to ensure the system constraint issues currently faced by our 3 regulated systems are adequately addressed. Mr Deputy Speaker, as I outlined earlier, this will be achieved through the implementation of the RECIP framework, which will determine a portfolio of required investments in capacity and essential system services tailored for each of the Darwin-Katherine, Alice Springs and Tennant Creek grids. Once this portfolio is presented, this government will move rapidly to implement the plan so we can stabilise the grids, reduce curtailment and restore confidence in our electricity system. Mr Deputy Speaker, I am anticipating that some members opposite are currently trying to justify that they did have a whole-of-system electricity plan for the Territory, namely their farcical plan for 50% renewable generation by 2030. Mr Deputy Speaker, I urge those members to spare us the justification because Labor couldn't even get the basics right when planning for projects and the system stability needed for the pursuit of their 50% renewables target. As we all remember, in 2016, Labor came into government promising to increase the Territory's renewable energy generation from 4 to 50% by 2030. Power and Water Corporation's 2023 Future Network Strategy reveals that the majority of this 50% renewable generation would come from large-scale solar installations. But Labor clearly didn't do the whole-of-system planning work to see that they had everything in place to reach this target. They neglected the fact that for large-scale solar to be added to the grid, their capacity needs to be firmed, adequate transmission capacity needs to be in place to dispatch electricity from the solar farms, and the system's strength must be increased in order to maintain grid stability. Firming the grid to integrate large-scale solar requires targeted investment. This includes battery storage to provide fast, short-term contingency, energy dispatch and frequency support to smooth variable solar output and bridge gaps during evening demand peaks. Synchronous condensers, assets designed to increase system strength by supplying rotational inertia and stabilising voltage, enabling safe connection of inverter-based generation such as solar. Or more simply, synchronous condensers help the grid to remain stable during shifting electricity generation and demand load periods. Combined, these measures lower the outage risk and maintain power system reliability needed to allow for the commissioning of additional solar capacity. However, without a robust planning and coordination process like that specified in the electricity market reform bills, Labor failed in all regards to deliver these projects in parallel with solar capacity coming online. Labor failed to deliver either a single synchronous condenser or large-scale battery project while they were in office. Only when the CLP government came into office was critical firming capacity delivered in the form of a 35 megawatt 𝙏𝙈𝙀𝙈 battery energy storage system, 9 years after the former Labor government first had the chance to start implementing these essential technologies. Due to Labor's failure to sufficiently invest in the firming infrastructure required for additional solar generation to be safely integrated into the grid, when it came for major solar projects, including projects located at Batchelor, Katherine and Manton, to be commissioned, they were prevented from exporting to the grid and left idle because of the former government's neglect of whole-of-system planning. Mr Deputy Speaker, before I make my closing remarks, I wish to highlight one more element in the energy market reforms that hasn't been discussed yet but demonstrates the CLP's commitment to equitable cost sharing in our electricity system. In this, I wish to briefly outline the importance of the Electricity Legislation Amendment Bill 2025 in defining a role for territory generation in providing ancillary services critical to maintaining a stable and reliable electricity system, and ensuring TGen has the ability to cost recover from energy networks for the supply of this critical service. Prior to the introduction of the bill, there was no formalised cost structure for providing the territory with these critical stabilising ancillary services. Territory generation has been performing this service and absorbing all cost, with the shortfall ultimately transferred to taxpayers. Other market participants benefiting from the arrangement were not charged for the services territory generation provided. But, Mr Deputy Speaker, what this bill changes is that in addition to defining territory generation as the provider of ancillary services, it also provides the framework and mechanisms for the costs associated with delivering the service to be recovered by TGen. Mr Deputy Speaker, the energy market reform bills before the Chamber today mark a fundamental shift in the Territory's energy future. After 8 years of underinvestment and stalled reform under Labor, the Territory's regulated electricity systems were left in a dire strait. The energy market reform legislation, the Electricity System and Market Operator Bill 2025 and the Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill 2025 provide the long overdue changes to the way our three regulated electricity systems operate. Our government is committed to provide Territorians with secure, reliable and affordable power that we deserve. And so I urge those in the Chamber to support the bills brought to the Parliament by our Deputy Chief Minister. I commend the bills to the House.
Thank you, Minister. Any further speakers? Member for Casuarina.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Firstly, I want to thank the Minister for bringing this important reform before the House. For too long, Territorians have been left waiting for real leadership in the power sector. After years of neglect, uncertainty and delay under the Labor, this government, the CLP Whēnau government, is finally doing the hard work to deliver stability, reliability and accountability in our electricity system. Mr Deputy Speaker, these reforms are not about politics, they are about people. They are about keeping the lights on for families in Nakara, TV, Brinkin, Lyons, Muirhead, Lee Point, and across the Territory, Mr Deputy Speaker, ensuring that small businesses in Casuarina can keep their doors open, and giving every Territorian confidence that when they flip the switch, the power will stay on. Mr Deputy Speaker, I commend the Minister for taking decisive action to modernise our electricity market, for driving reform that balances investment and affordability, and for strengthening the system that Labor left in crisis. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this government is getting on with the job of rebuilding the territory, fixing what was broken, restoring confidence, and delivering real results for Territorians, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So thank you, Minister, for your leadership in securing the future of power in the Northern Territory. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I stand here today to talk about something simple, something every Territorian understands: keeping the lights on. A few weeks ago, I met James, who runs a small business cafe in Casuarina. He's been serving coffees and smiles for more than a decade. He works really hard, Mr. Deputy Speaker. He employs locals. He's proud of his little shop, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Yeah. But one afternoon, the power went out. Again. No warning, no reason. The fridge stopped, the ice melted, the air conditioner died, and customers walked away. He lost a full day's income, Mr. Deputy Speaker, a full day's income. When I visited him later, he looked tired. He said, "Khoda, I do everything right, but I can't fight darkness." That, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is what really we are talking about today. Electricity is not a number on a bill. It's a small business staying open. It is a family keeping food cold. It is a child studying for school. It is the safety for hospital ward. Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's not about the power poles and the cables. It is about people. And yet, for 8 long years, Labor ignored Territorians. Shame. They ignored the warnings from our power industry experts. They ignored the aging generators at Channel Island, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They ignored the small businesses like James, who suffered every time the grid went down. Mr. Deputy Speaker, they didn't act at all. Not because they didn't know, but because they didn't care enough to make hard decisions for Territorians, Mr. Deputy Speaker. 8 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And what did Labor do? Nothing. Shame. Nothing, Mr. Deputy Speaker. No new generators. No serious investment in our grid. No plan for our growing population, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Instead, they left us with an aging system, mounting costs and blackouts becoming a way of our life. This is not a leadership, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is total neglect for Territorians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, when the CLP, Finocchiaro government came into government last year, we walked into a mess. We found power stations with turbines built in the 1980s, before even I was born, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We found solar farms waiting years for connections because of red tape. We found the community service obligations, CSO, the subsidy that keeps electricity affordable, blowing out to $192 million, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's a 51 million increase in just 1 year. We're not talking about the future yet. We're just talking about just what happened in 1 year. That money comes straight from the Territorians' pocket, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Money that could have gone to our schools, hospitals, and roads. Wasted because Labor couldn't manage the basics. Mr. Deputy Speaker, they left Territorians paying more for less. So the CLP government acted fastly and quickly. In just 1 year, this CLP, Finocchiaro government, has done what Labor couldn't do in 8 years, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We delivered the Darwin-Catherine Battery Energy Storage System, the DKBESS, the biggest battery in the territory. And when the blackout hit in the September, it was the battery that saved the grid, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It kicked in instantly and kept the lights on. Without it, people would have been sitting in the darkness for hours, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's what real action looks like, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We also extended the life of key generators at Channel Island, one to 2031 and another to 2035, giving us breathing room to build for the future. And we introduced the Electricity Market Reform Bill, the first serious reform in over a decade, to finally bring the structure, accountability, and stability back into the system. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we have done more than 12 months than Labor did in 8 years. Because while Labor ignored Territorians, we are listening and we are delivering for Territorians. Mr. Deputy Speaker, power reliability isn't a luxury. It's a lifeline for Territorians. In Catherine, families faced 6.7 outages last year, more than 8 hours without electricity for every customer, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In Darwin, every wet season storms knock out parts of the grid. In Casuarina, I hear it all the time from families in TV and Nakara who lose power during the storms, to business owners who can't trade when the lights flicker. And in Royal Darwin Hospital, Mr. Deputy Speaker, every blockout is a potential crisis. The average Territorian suffers 2.6 outages per year, more than a double the national average. That's the cost of Labor's inaction, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's the cost of being ignored. And then there is the other side, affordability, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Power bills keep rising and families are struggling. A mom in TV told me she turns off the aircon at the night because she can't afford the bill. The elderly couple in Nakara said they sat with the lights dim to save money, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's not a choice. That's a survival for a few families. When the Labor left office, they left Territorians with a higher cost, no plan, and broken system that depend on every growing subsidies. Every dollar vested in inefficiency came from families and already doing it tough. We are changing that, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are modernizing our government-owned power corporations. We are cutting red tapes so new solar projects can get connected faster, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are making sure that every dollar spent actually benefits Territorians, not bureaucracy. Affordable power is about fairness, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It is about giving every family the right to live in comfort without fear of the next bill. Let's not lose sight for the human stories. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I've met a single dad in Muirhead who works night shift to cover rising power cost. I've spoken with the local shop owners who run generator just to keep their doors open during the outages. And I've seen older Territorians sitting in the heat, sweating, through the night because they're too scared to use the aircon, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I'm sure there are many more people across the territory who are worried for their future and for their children's future. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are the people Labor ignored. These are the people we are fighting for. Now, let's look ahead. The territory's future depends on the smart, stable, and forward-looking investment in power. We are a growing economy with defence expansion, new homes in my electorate, Lee Point and Muirhead, and industries setting up across the top end. That means more demand, and it means we need to plan ahead, not scramble at the last minute like Labor did. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the CLP is investing now, not waiting for another crisis. The DK BESS battery was just the start. We are building a new generation capacity, expanding solar projects, and preparing the grid for the future. We are creating jobs in renewable energy, training young Territorians to work in solar, battery storage, and energy management. Because every new project we build doesn't deliver power, it delivers opportunity, Mr. Deputy Speaker. That's what real leaderships look like. Let's remember, the NT stands alone in Australia. We are not connected to East Coast grid. We can't import power when something breaks down, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If the system fails here, we fix it ourselves. And that's why we need a strong, reliable infrastructure. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we need to be a powerhouse ourselves, not depend on anyone. Labor ignored that reality, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They spent years pretending the problem would go away. We are facing it head on. We are securing fuel supply, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are planning for redundancy, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are building systems that can withstand our harsh climate and growing demand, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because in the territory, energy security is not optional. It's a survival for Territorians. Here is the difference, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Labor had 8 years and wasted them. The CLP Finocchiaro government has had 1 year, and we are rebuilding the system from the ground up. Labor ignored Territorians, and we're listening to them. Labor made excuses. We are making decisions for Territorians. Labor left the lights flickering. We are keeping them on for all Territorians. It's that simple, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I speak about this with passion because I see it every day, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I see it when I walk through Casuarina Square, when I talk to the families in Lyons or parents at Nakara Primary, when I visit seniors in Brinkin or workers in TV, Mr. Deputy Speaker. They all say same thing. They just want the basics to work. They want power that stays on. They want bills that they can afford. They want to trust that when they flick the switch, the light will come on, Mr. Deputy Speaker. This is what, that is what this is about, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's not a politics, it's about people, our people. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the CLP Finocchiaro government is clear what we want to do for Territorians. We will keep building, we will keep investing, and we will keep putting Territorian first. We are not here to make excuses. We are here to deliver. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we are restoring the reliability. We are protecting affordability, and we are investing in the future. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we're building the territory's power system so our kids grow up in a place where blackouts are rare, bills are fair, and the opportunity shines bright for them. Mr. Deputy Speaker, reliable and affordable electricity is a basic necessity for everyone. It is the foundation of everything we do. Mr. Deputy Speaker, without power, businesses fail. Without power, children fall behind. Without power, families will suffer. Labor ignored that. They ignored Territorians. They left us in the dark, literally and figuratively. But the CLP 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙀𝙎𝙏 government is bringing back the light, Mr. Deputy Speaker. We are rebuilding the system that Labor broke. We are investing in our people, not the politics. And we are proving that strong leadership can deliver what matters most: safety, comfort, and hope, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So let's make sure Territorians never again have to fight darkness. Let's build territory where light stays on, the bill stays fair, and the future shines bright for all Territorians, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Because that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is what people deserve. That is what CLP 𝙏𝙏𝙀𝙎𝙏 government stands for. And that is why I'm proud to serve as a member for Casuarina, to fight for light, for fairness, and for the future of our territory. I commend this reform to the Assembly, Mr. Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Casuarina. Member for Blain.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And I rise to support this bill for my people of Blain and the residents of Maldon, Woodruff and 𝙏𝙬𝙗𝙏. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to speak about the human impact of 8 years of Labor neglect of our power grid in their pursuit of ideology over keeping the lights on. On Monday, the 20th of October at 7:47 p.m, there was a blackout in my electorate affecting the suburbs of Maldon, Woodruff and the suburb of Driver in the electorate of Drysdale. Power and Water have advised the cause of the blackout was an insulation breakdown leading to a dead short in an underground cable between Demestra Court and Tiverton Court in Maldon. These are old cables that desperately need updating and fixing, and they haven't had any maintenance over the last 8 years. This bill will be addressing that. On the evening, crews responded rapidly and quickly isolated the location of the fault and worked hard to rectify it, restoring power by 9:10 p.m. I thank the hard-working crews who went out to fix it. Thank you to those hard-working men and women who, instead of being home with their families, they were out working hard serving the good people of Palmerston. I asked my community what impact this blackout had on them. Jess from Maldon said, "It was super frustrating. The 6 power surges as the crews worked to isolate the fault and where it was located. The 6 power surges were more annoying as I had to unplug all the appliances so we didn't lose them. By the time the power came back on, house cooled down and kids ate a second dinner. They didn't go to sleep until after 10:30 p.m. on a school night. They're usually in bed by 7 p.m. So made for very grumpy and tired kids at 6 a.m. the next morning. And as a father of 3, I understand exactly where she's coming from." Lisa from Maldon said, 3 power outages in a month is crazy. The last one kept me very anxious as I could not see a thing, and with neuropathy in my feet, I was quite anxious, walking around to find a torch. Phone dead. Ended up having to sleep elsewhere. John from Malden said, well, mate, the last time was hard, but otherwise would have done it harder. The older ones need the power for a lot of reasons. It was a bloody hot night. You can't open your windows like years ago. People built this, so there's going to be stuff-ups. Not what he said, my words. We just need to minimise them. Cheers. Sally Ann from Malden said, couldn't get my kids to sleep. It was very hot and we shouldn't have outages in heatwave conditions. It's literally a hazard. Rachel from Malden said, I had a sick child with a temperature during the last one. No lights, no air conditioning or fans. We had fortunately already eaten, but keeping a sick child cool without power was not fun or easy, not to mention losing valuable lesson planning time for school the next day. As a teacher, we love our teachers, we support our teachers. This is generally done after dinner and family time. Yes, I could have used my laptop without the charger or internet, however, accessing the school system to upload resources would have been a tad difficult. So, there's more. Nicola from Malden said, I work from home and the outages have impacted my ability to complete some of my shifts. This is a brief overview of the human impact that 8 years of Labor's neglect of our power system, of planning and investment, have caused on the residents of Palmerston and the residents of my electorate of Blain. And now this bill has come to the House and hopefully will begin to clean up the mess that was left to us. Mr Deputy Speaker, legislative reform of our electricity system and market are long overdue, as has been repeatedly advised by the NT Utilities Commission as the independent regulator. Now, I'm a bit of a nerd, Mr Deputy Speaker, so I go and read these documents, and I must say, for years now, the Utilities Commission has been warning of growing instability in the Darwin-Katherine grid. And luckily, this was only a short blackout. We've seen much longer ones under the previous government when they let us run out of fuel, run out of gas. How about that? I grew up on a farm down near Bachelor, and we always made sure when we turned the generator on at night, there was enough fuel in the tank to get us through the evening so that when we turned it off and went to bed, we didn't run out. It's pretty poor planning if you let the generator run out of fuel. That's a bit embarrassing, but that happened under the previous Labor government. These bills establish the framework by which our government can take action to provide affordable and reliable electricity to Territorians at lowest cost. This is in stark contrast to the inaction and negligence by Labor of our vital electricity infrastructure. They were too preoccupied with media releases about their renewables, 50% renewables by 2030 target, always with the targets, never about the action, never about what they're actually doing, never about the implementation. That's the difference between that side of the chamber and this side. That side of the chamber is always about grand visions and plans and, we'll have a target for this and a target for that, But don't worry about actually doing anything. Don't worry about actually getting things done. On this side of the chamber, we're about getting things done. We're about delivering for Territorians. That's what we do. They were too preoccupied with their media releases, managing the media instead of managing the territory, to bother investing in our electricity network. Interesting decision-making, to say the least. For clarity, under the opposition leader's tenure as Minister for Renewables and Essential Services, our grid never cracked 20% renewable energy. Further, even though the program of legislative electricity market reform was begun in 2020, by the time Labor were voted out last August, they still had not progressed the legislation. That was left to us, to the Deputy Chief Minister, who took the reins of this and got the legislation done, got the bill done, brought it to the House, and now we're here debating it today, getting things done. In just over 12 months, our government has moved faster and further than Labor ever did, and we are delivering on our year of action through the debate and passage of these bills. And we have had to move swiftly as our electricity system situation is indeed dire. For example, going back to the Utilities Commission, in their Electricity Outlook Report 2024, they state that electricity reliability challenges in the Alice Springs grid are an immediate and ongoing concern. I feel, Mr Deputy Speaker, I really feel for the people of Alice. Who could forget the shame of a major city, a city in the heart of the country, a city in the heart of Australia that endured a multi-day blackout. I can't remember what year it was. I think it was 2018 or something similar, when the former Dale Wakefield, member for Breitling, was the Essential Services Minister, and they just charged ahead, making changes to the grid without actually doing the planning, without doing the work. And what was the result? Well, they plugged in a whole big solar farm, cloud went over, and the whole grid collapsed. And everyone in Alice Springs was sitting there twiddling their thumbs in the dark and in the heat. So, and then we had the embarrassment of the ETU, the Electrical Trades Union, calling for the sacking of a Labor minister. What a shame. And eventually she had to throw the chief executive of the relevant corporation under the bus to save her own skin. But that's the way that Labor work. In addition to that, there is a medium risk of reliability challenges in the Darwin-Katherine grid. Reliability challenges. These are people in the Utilities Commission are extremely experienced technical public servants. When they say reliability challenges, they're talking about blackouts. So that means there's more mess that we have to clean up. As underscored by our recent blackouts. Without the system and market reforms these bills enable, this situation will only get worse, threatening Territorians' energy security and affordability. The member opposite, in her contribution to this debate, talked about having more targets. I think most people would agree that it's common sense to say that energy should be reliable, affordable and clean, probably in that order. I think most people want to say, if you flick the switch, the light should come on. You should be able to afford to pay your power bill without having to take it out of the grocery bill. And then once you've got that, yeah, let's make it as clean as possible. But you know what? I think the NT has got probably one of the cleanest grids in the country. There's no coal. There's no coal in our grid. Clean gas. Thank you, member for Drysdale. And a high penetration of solar. I would say, I'm happy to be corrected, but I'd say we'd have the cleanest grid in the country already. The increasing solar penetration in our energy mix and the dilapidated state of our electricity infrastructure have brought us to the brink of crisis. I think most of us in here can remember in recent years the Darwin CBD undergoing blackouts for hours at a time. I remember when the lights in this chamber went out. We can't have that. We need to fix that. Again, more mess that we inherited. We're doing the best we can with what we were left with when we came to government. That is why this legislation sets up the NT Electricity System Market Operator, aka Intesmo. What a cool name, Intesmo. I love that. As a statutory body responsible for uplifting our electricity system. Intesmo, that sounds like a superhero. Honestly, it's like Captain Intesmo, here to save the day. Labor for 8 years let our grid fall apart. Captain Intesmo is here to save the day. I love that. I don't know who came up with that name, but they deserve a gold star. Captain Intesmo will take a strategic, coordinated approach to procuring what we need when we need it in order to keep the lights on. Intesmo will use the centralised public procurement model to minimise the cost to Territorians. I had a question sent to me by a constituent while I was canvassing for their contributions for this speech that I'm giving today, and they said, oh, how much is it going to cost, when you do this? Well, I'll tell you what, it's going to cost less than it would under Labor, because under Labor, they just shuffle everything off to the CSO, $192 million. Costs going up and up without limit. Just put it on the credit card. She'll be right, mate. Go to the Treasurer, the former, who was the last Treasurer under Labor? Was it Eva Lawler? And before that, Michael Gunner. She'll be right. Just put it on the credit card. So the Intesmo will use the centralised public procurement model to minimise the cost to Territorians and minimise delays or duplications of effort. Intesmo will be answerable to the Minister for Energy, the Honourable Member for Nelson, and its board will have oversight of all investments in our regulated electricity systems. While Intesmo is being established with a final commencement date in early 2027, all urgent procurements before then will be overseen by the Energy Subcommittee of Cabinet, chaired by the Minister for Energy. This ensures strategic oversight and coordination of the activities and expenditure of the individual government-owned corporations, aka GOCs, ensuring we deliver on our commitment to deliver secure and reliable energy to Territorians. Our government is taking decisive action to address problems that for too long Labor has ignored, pushing up Territorians' power bills while our electricity infrastructure crumbles. Blackouts should not be the norm in a first world country, particularly the Northern Territory, which has an abundance of natural gas and sunlight. These bills are long overdue, and I commend them to the Assembly. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.
Thank you, Member for Blain. Any further speakers? Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. And I'd like to first rise and thank the Opposition Leader for thanking the Power and Water staff. It's a nice change to hear from the other side of the chamber to be supporting our good public servants. So thank you, Opposition Leader. It's a shame not everybody in the Labor Greens Johnston alliance followed suit. And we saw in question time, once again, the ugly using the power of this place to throw mud at people who do not have the power to respond. If you have an issue, attack the minister. That's what we're here for. We don't need to... It is unbecoming of a parliamentarian to attack those outside of this House who cannot respond. Mr Deputy Speaker, I rise in support of the electricity market reform legislation introduced by the Minister for Mining and Energy. This legislative reform of our electricity system and market is urgently needed, and it is long overdue to ensure Territorians have reliable energy. The good member for Blain has discussed the issues we see in our electorates of Blain and Drysdale, especially the older suburbs of Palmerston, where blackouts have unfortunately become a common part of our daily lives. And so I will support any measure to improve the reliability of our energy infrastructure throughout the Palmerston region. And once again, I thank the Deputy Chief Minister for bringing this on so that we can restore reliability to the grid. Mr Deputy Speaker, our government has scrapped Labor's foolhardily 50% 2030 renewable target. We scrapped it because, Mr Deputy Speaker, 50% renewables by 2030 would have meant the people of Drysdale would be paying humongous dollars that they do not have for energy. And I will not stand in this House and condemn the people I represent to mountains of debt and huge electricity prices in the pursuit of some vague idea of virtue, Mr Deputy Speaker. I will always stand here and advocate for the people of Drysdale, and they want cheap, reliable energy. Cheap, reliable energy, Mr Deputy Speaker, that is what I want. And as we heard about some of the discussion today about our natural gas and other fossil fuels that we are providing. This House should remember that it is not just the Northern Territory, there is a whole world. And right now, today, according to the International Energy Agency, 750 million people will go without electricity. All of them in the most impoverished parts of the world. A further 2.1 billion will only access energy through dirty fuels, generally being cooking fuels in the form of biomass, in the form of charcoal, both of which are extremely toxic to the people using it and far more polluting. And so when we discuss energy supply in our own backyard, we must remember what it means to our neighbours. If we have the potential to get cheap, much cleaner fuels out of our earth and get them to our neighbours all around the world, and we can get them out of poverty so that they can also enjoy cleaner energy, healthier energy, then I would say, as citizens of the world, we owe that. We have a moral responsibility to the rest of the world, and the NT's clean gas reserves, far cleaner than traditional forms of fossil fuel, we have a moral obligation to ensure we can get them out of poverty, industrialise them as fast as possible, so that they can then afford the zero-emission technologies. Because it's all good and well for us to sit in this chamber and talk about how great we all are with our Western wealth, when people all around the world will never have access to that degree of technology that we do. So I say on that, we have a moral responsibility to access our gas reserves for people all around the world. I spoke earlier this week on the need of cheap energy. We must adopt a least cost approach, which is exactly what the Minister is aiming for, to provide secure and reliable electricity for Territorian homes and businesses. I spoke earlier yesterday about what that actually means, because cheap energy means we can have manufacturing, it means we can run our homes cheaper, so for the people in Drysdale that means jobs. Jobs that have evaporated because of the mismanagement of energy in this country. It means you spend less on your power bills, so you can spend more on education, on health, on going shopping, on taking your kids out for the weekend, going camping. This is what our government wants. We don't want you spending unnecessarily amounts of money on energy. Without these reforms, Madam Speaker, the NT's cost of electricity generation will continue to rise sharply, and our community service obligation to subsidise Territory energy bills simply won't keep up. It's like the other side doesn't want to speak about the plain truth that Territorians face. The fact is the cost of energy is going up, and it's going up sharply, and without these amendments, it will only get worse, Madam Speaker. Now, this isn't about the ideology of gas versus renewables, because I've spoken many times in this place of the huge opportunity solar presents in the Northern Territory. And so, to be sucked into that argument is a falsehood as well, because we see huge potential in solar, but what we want to deliver is cheap, reliable energy. We want to minimise the blackouts that occur throughout the Territory and occur in Drysdale. So to my residents, particularly in Driver and Grey, who experience regular blackouts, that is what we're aiming at doing. We must place downward pressure on energy costs and reinforce the stability and reliability of our ageing infrastructure. And to highlight the age of some of the infrastructure we're dealing with, on Channel Island, gas generators are almost 40 years old. That's older than some members of this chamber, including myself, Madam Speaker, and the member for 𝙏𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎. And as the ladies at Anti-Breast Cancer Voice will attest to, I don't move as well as I once did, and I'm sure those generators aren't functioning as well as they once did. So these reforms are required to legislate the most cost-effective and time-effective way to shore up our deteriorating electricity networks. We are moving quickly to make up for years of Labor inactivity and neglect in this space. Our government is finalising the Regulated Electricity System Investment Plan, which we need to implement swiftly to prevent frequent blackouts in this term of government. The people of Alice Springs and Katherine in particular are vulnerable to increased frequency and duration of blackouts in the near term, as reported by the Utilities Commission. By bringing forth this legislation, our government is tackling our electricity challenges head-on behalf of Territorians, because that is who we have put this bill up for, and we are not ashamed to say that we are backing Territorians so that they can have reliable, cheap energy. Once this legislation is in place, we will have a legislative pathway to accelerate and roll out the RESIP with robust governance and oversight by Cabinet and the Anti-Electricity System and Market Operator. This will ensure that Territorian taxpayer money is spent wisely, procuring and contracting what we need, when we need it, with two explicit aims. One, putting downward pressure on electricity costs to both Territorians and NT government. That's you at home. That is the people of Drysdale. We want downward pressure on electricity costs for the people of Drysdale and my electorate and NT government. And number two, reinforcing our electricity infrastructure to ensure that Territorians enjoy the electricity reliability that they deserve, keeping aircons running even in the peak of the wet season. To do this, we must pass these electricity market reforms. Therefore, Madam Speaker, I commend the Minister and I commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? Deputy Chief Minister, in closing.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the members of the Assembly for their contribution. Madam Speaker, I just want to address a few things that I've heard while I've been sitting here listening to the debate today. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition talked about cutting the solar feed tariff, and I think she's trying to rewrite history, Madam Speaker, because we all know it's the Labor government who cut the solar feed tariff, Madam Speaker, and then they promised to grandfather those people on that existing solar tariff amount, which was about 18 cents, I think, Madam Speaker. But we know, Madam Speaker, they broke that promise because they didn't grandfather that solar feed-in tariff at all. Second thing, Madam Speaker, the Leader Opposition spoke about this is reform's a great idea and she's going to support it, so I thank her for that. And then she went on, in her words, work has been done over the last couple of years in relation to this reform, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, after hearing that, I went through and got the Utilities Commission report, and I read through it again, and just on page 13 it talks about a paragraph that noting, and I'll read it out, Madam Speaker, and I'll quote the word, noting the priority Northern Territory electricity market has not been looked at for a number of years. Has not been looked at for a number of years, Madam Speaker. So, you know, this isn't my words, Madam Speaker, this is the words from the Utilities Commission saying that the work has not been looked at for a number of years. So, Madam Speaker, I'm not sure that what the Leader Opposition was talking about, and I'm sure she didn't mislead Parliament on purpose, Madam Speaker. And I went through the report a bit further, Madam Speaker, and another bit it talks about you know, the work on this. Work stopped in 2022 and was incomplete at that stage. Considerable effort would be needed to review and update what was developed in 2022. So it says here in the second part of this report, work stopped in 2022 and was incomplete. 2 years before the election. 2 years, Madam Speaker, and yet the Leader Opposition came in here just a couple of hours ago and said this is a great idea and work has been done over the last couple of years, Madam Speaker. So like I said, I'm sure she didn't mean to mislead Parliament on purpose, but I think clearly the Utilities Commission have said in two separate parts in their report that this hasn't been looked at and work was stopped in about 2022, Madam Speaker. So just to make it clear, Madam Speaker, this wasn't a project that the Labor government gave any priority to. In fact, the Utilities Commission said that they stopped that work, Madam Speaker. Yet, on the other hand, Madam Speaker, when we come to office this year, the Treasurer commissioned a report from the Utilities Commission to look at this immediately, which is in late 2024, only a few months after taking office, Madam Speaker. So it just really goes to show that the work in relation to the reform for the electricity market stopped a number of years ago. We've come into office and we've collected it and we've run the ball up, Madam Speaker, in getting things going. Madam Speaker, she also mentioned, when I say she, the Leader Opposition, spoke about the power bills and schools having to pay, Madam Speaker. Look, we know, the Education Minister said in this House a number of times, schools will not be worse off. The department will be paying the power bill for this, Madam Speaker. So again, I'm sure the Leader Opposition didn't mean to mislead Parliament on purpose, but I know that the Education Minister has come here and spoken about this previously, how the department will pay the power bills, and it's not coming out of the Better, Fairer Schools agreement, Madam Speaker. And she should know this because the Leader Opposition was the fourth failed Education Minister. So, Madam Speaker, just some of these, she talks about stunts and the CLP doing stunts, Madam Speaker. I think there's at least two things there. I'd say the political stunts, Madam Speaker, was done by the Leader of the Opposition because clearly what she just said in Parliament was incorrect, and that things aren't exactly as they seem, and the Utilities Commission is there to back that up. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I thank my government colleagues for supporting the electricity market reform legislation which you've introduced. I'd also like the opportunity to thank the hard-working public servants in the Department of Mines and Energy and the government-owned corporations, especially Power and Water, for all the hard work they've done behind the scenes on these bills, Madam Speaker. I'd also like to thank the Power and Water personnel for their tireless work on the ground maintaining our electricity system and fixing these outages swiftly, as they've done in Palmerston earlier this week. Madam Speaker, the NT Electricity System and Market Operator Bill 2025 Serial 35 will establish the NT Electricity System Market Operator, or 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈𝙀𝙎, as an independent entity that will plan, procure and operate the NT system market. This will be done under a transparent and robust government framework designed to deliver reliable, secure electricity to the lowest cost, at the lowest cost to Territorians, Madam Speaker. As part of the separation of 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈 and the model establishment, the NT procurement public procurement model, there will be a robust change of management process, Madam Speaker. The Leader of Opposition asked about when it was going to come into place. 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈 will be established as a separate structural entity by July 1, 2027, with interim arrangements put in place between the passage of these bills and July 1, 2027, Madam Speaker. During the process, I'll start the next bill, the Electricity Legislation Amendment Market Reform Bill, Serial 36, will also establish the territory electricity market as a regulatory environment in which 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈 will operate its central planning, procurement and system operation functions, Madam Speaker. There will be consultation with government and stakeholders by the department over the next 12 months to develop regulations and rules which will govern the electricity market. These are the rules that will apply to the public procurement model that will be administered by 𝙏𝙄𝙈𝙈. This consultation will take in form of an industry reference group comprising of key stakeholders so that certainty will be provided to industry and ensure that the market participants in our electricity system are heard and represented. The public procurement model is about providing certainty to industry and ensuring the most cost-effective approach to maintaining and upgrading our electrical networks for all Territorians. Madam Speaker, there's some commentary from the opposition and the crossbench about the lack of the mention of renewables in these bills, Madam Speaker. I also note, Madam Speaker, these bills don't mention the word gas because, Madam Speaker, they are agnostic. They don't talk about what sort of energy, Madam Speaker. They just talk about what can we do to have the lowest energy for Territorians. So unlike the 50% renewables, which is at any cost, Madam Speaker, this is about making electricity reliable and affordable for all Territorians. And it doesn't mention any form of electricity, Madam Speaker, because what I'm getting at is once this is up and running, any form of electricity is going to be open to the market as long as it's at a lowest possible cost to Territorian. So there's going to be a mix, Madam Speaker. We know there are already a mix of solar and renewables in the system, Madam Speaker. But what we need to do, Madam Speaker, is make sure the system is stable and secure, which is what we're going to do immediately, Madam Speaker, and then we can look at the lowest cost electricity. And this, like I said, Madam Speaker, this is about making sure that electricity is reliable and at the lowest cost, which may include gas and solar, but all above, the mix must ensure, Madam Speaker, that the electricity remains reliable and affordable. The energy mix will be dictated by government policy under the RECEP to provide reliable energy at the lowest cost, which may include solar, it may include gas. Madam Speaker, again, it goes back to reliable, affordable energy, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know what energy mixes are going to come and what new energy may come in the future, maybe hydrogen, Madam Speaker. I'm not sure. I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm certainly not a leader in this sort of energy. But what we can say, Madam Speaker, is our policy will be we're going to look at all forms of energy, but we want reliable and lowest cost energy, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the member for Johnston said heat waves can be dangerous, Madam Speaker, and I agree with her. And I do agree with her. That's why we need electricity systems that's reliable, even in our peak summer conditions, Madam Speaker. We heard the member for Blain list off a whole range of constituents talk about the heat and affecting their young children, Madam Speaker. Again, that's why we need to make sure this system is reliable. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition talked about my report was scaremongering. Well, Madam Speaker, it was a statement of facts, Madam Speaker. The facts provided by the NT Utilities Commission, the independent electricity regulator in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition in a claim that the government was never given advice that our electricity system was in a fragile state. I quote from the advice from the Utilities Commission in their 2024 report, said that the Outlook report, which is the one previously, that the Territory's electricity supply has reached a critical juncture. They also stated that significant investment is unavoidable in addressing current and emerging power system issues. According to the last Utilities Commission Power System Performance Review, Katherine residents endured over 8 hours without power, spread across multiple power outages in 23-24. Territorians endure over twice as many blackouts as the rest of on average of the nation. Our blackouts lasted 30% longer than the rest of the nation. Madam Speaker, how does that not indicate that our electricity system is in a dire strait? So not only the reports, Madam Speaker, the facts that we're getting power blackouts in the Northern Territory show that anyone with a bit of common sense with that, our electricity system is fragile. Madam Speaker, again, the CLP, the Leader of Opposition spoke about renewables and not mentioned in these bills. Well, it's not, Madam Speaker. No sort of energy. It's just about making sure the market system operators is there, and then we have the lowest reliable. Madam Speaker, there's little point prioritising our solar if we can't even effectively use or dispatch the solar we already have, Madam Speaker. So we need to make sure that we get that up and running. Madam Speaker, there have been generation restrictions on our networks since 2019. And Madam Speaker, the Labor government has been in power since 2019 to August last year. How that, it's, again, more example, doesn't indicate that our system is fragile and in peril. Madam Speaker, that is why these bills represent a shift to establishing an energy mix which is above all prioritises the reliability at the lowest cost to Territorians. Madam Speaker, I have previously said the passage of these bills is the first step in providing secure, reliable and affordable electricity to all Territorians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.